The sky above Seoul turned black at exactly 3:47 inches the afternoon. Commander Tae-sung stood on the roof of the military headquarters, watching as massive shapes descended through the clouds. They were not clouds. They were ships. Hundreds of them. Each one larger than any building in the city. The Velen Empire, had arrived. Tae-sung had spent 20 years preparing for threats. He had trained for wars against other nations. He had studied tactics and strategies, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The ships hung in the air like metal mountains, blocking out the sun. For a moment, the entire city went silent. 8 million people looked up at the sky and held their breath. Then the fire came. Plasma beams shot down from the ships. They struck the ground with terrible force. Buildings exploded. Streets melted. The screams started. And they did not stop. Tae-sung watched as the defense towers fired their missiles. The missiles flew upward, straight and true. They hit the alien shields and disappeared like raindrops hitting glass. "All units, fall back," Tae-sung said into his radio. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "Repeat. All units, fall back. We cannot win this fight." Across the city, soldiers ran, civilians ran, everyone ran. But there was nowhere to run to. The alien ships covered the sky from horizon to horizon. More ships appeared over Busan, over Daegu, over every major city in the country. Reports came in from around the world. New York was burning. London was burning. Tokyo was burning. The whole world was burning. In a coastal research facility near Busan, Dr. Yuna heard the explosions in the distance. She was a marine biologist, a woman of 43 years who had spent her entire life studying the ocean. She had never held a gun. She had never been in a fight. But she understood, in that moment, that her old life was over. The facility shook as something exploded nearby. Yuna grabbed the edge of her desk to stay standing. Her assistant, a young man named Hyun Woo, burst through the door. "They're attacking the harbor," he said. His face was pale with fear. "What do we do?" Yuna looked at her computer screen. Years of research filled the files. Studies on dolphin communication, analysis of whale song patterns, research on the hunting strategies of great white sharks. She had spent decades learning how ocean creatures thought, how they communicated, how they worked together. An idea began to form in her mind. A strange idea. Perhaps a crazy idea. "We go underground," she said. "And we keep working." The Velen ground forces landed 3 hours after the first attack. They were tall creatures, nearly 3 meters high, with gray skin and 4 arms. They wore armor that glowed with strange energy. Their weapons fired beams of light that could cut through steel. They marched through the ruined streets of Seoul in perfect formation, stepping over the bodies of the fallen. Commander Tae-sung watched them from his hiding place in a collapsed building. He had 17 soldiers left. 17 out of 3,000. The rest were dead or scattered. He clutched his rifle, knowing it was useless. The alien armor stopped bullets like they were nothing. "What are your orders, sir?" a young private asked. Her name was Eunji, and she was only 19 years old. She should have been in university, studying and laughing with friends. Instead, she was covered in dust and blood, hiding from monsters. Tae-sung did not have an answer. For the first time in his life, he had no plan. The Velen announcement came at sunset. Every screen, every radio, every device on Earth carried the same message. A Velen commander appeared, his face cold and emotionless. "People of Earth," he said, "your military forces have been destroyed. Your governments have fallen. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. If you do not surrender, we will end your species. There will be no second chance. There will be no mercy." The message ended. Silence fell across the ruined world. In the underground bunker beneath Gangwon Province, General Dong-wook gathered the survivors. They were a small group, scientists, soldiers, engineers. Maybe 50 people in total. They sat in the dim light, their faces showing fear and exhaustion. "We cannot fight them with weapons," Dong-wook said. He was an old man, 67 years old, but his voice was still strong. "Their technology is too advanced, but we must find a way to fight. Surrender means death, not just for us, but for everyone." "How?" someone asked. "They destroyed our armies in hours. We have nothing left." A voice came from the back of the room. "We have something they don't expect." Everyone turned. Dr. Yuna stood in the doorway, still wearing her dirty lab coat. She had walked for 18 hours through the mountains to reach the bunker. Her feet were bleeding. Her body was exhausted. But her eyes were bright, with something that looked like hope. "The Velens studied us for years before they attacked," she said. "They learned about our weapons, our technology, our military tactics. They prepared for human war." She stepped forward, pulling a small device from her pocket. "But Earth is not just humans. There are 8 million other species on this planet. Creatures that have been hunting and fighting and surviving for millions of years. Creatures the Velens never thought to study." General Dong-wook looked at her with confusion. "You want to fight aliens with animals?" Yuna smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Not just animals," she said. "Partners. Allies. The most deadly predators on Earth, fighting together for the first time in history." She connected her device to the bunker's main screen. Images appeared: sharks, wolves, bears, eagles, swarms of insects. "The Velens think they are conquering one species," Yuna said. "They have no idea what they have awakened." Outside the bunker, the night was dark and quiet. The alien ships floated above the ruined cities, their lights glowing like evil stars. The Velen commanders reviewed their reports with satisfaction. Earth's military was broken. Resistance was minimal. The conquest was almost complete. They did not notice the wolves gathering in the forests. They did not see the sharks moving through the dark waters. They did not hear the eagles calling to each other across the mountains. Something was waking up. Something old and patient and very, very angry. The clock showed 69 hours remaining until the deadline. The real war was about to begin. The bunker was cold and dark. 50 people sat in the main room, looking at Dr. Yuna like she had lost her mind. General Dong-wook rubbed his tired eyes and tried to understand what the marine biologist was saying. "Let me make sure I understand," he said slowly. "You want to use animals to fight an alien army. Animals against plasma weapons and energy shields." "Not just any animals," Yuna replied. "And not just fighting. Working together. Communicating. Coordinating attacks like a real army." A man laughed from the corner of the room. He was Dr. Hana's assistant, a soldier named Kite who had seen half his unit die that morning. "This is madness. A wolf cannot stop a plasma beam. A shark cannot fly up to destroy their ships." "You're right," Yuna said calmly. "One wolf cannot. One shark cannot. But Earth has over 100,000 wolves, over 400 species of sharks, billions of insects, millions of birds. What if they all fought together?" The room went quiet. People looked at each other with confusion and doubt. A woman stepped forward. Her name was Dr. Hana, and she was an entomologist, a scientist who studied insects. She was small and thin, with glasses that kept sliding down her nose, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I have been researching insect communication for 15 years, she said. "Ants can coordinate millions of individuals to fight enemies much larger than themselves. Bees can attack in perfect formation. And Asian giant hornets." She paused. "They are the most deadly insects on Earth. A single hornet can kill 40 bees in 1 minute." A swarm of them can destroy anything in their path. General Dong-wook leaned forward. Go on. The problem has always been communication. Dr. Hana continued. Animals cannot understand human language. They cannot follow orders. But what if we could change that? 70 mentor. Marcus. A young man stood up from behind a computer terminal. His name was Daeho, and he was a neural link engineer. He had been working in a secret government laboratory before the invasion. Now, he was one of the few survivors of his team. I can change that, he said. I have been developing a neural interface system for 3 years. It was supposed to help paralyzed patients control machines with their thoughts. But the same technology can work with animals. He pulled up a diagram on the screen. It showed a small device, no bigger than a coin. This creates a bridge between human and animal minds. Not control the animals, keep their free will. But we can share feelings, intentions, warnings. We can tell them that danger is coming. We can show them who the enemy is. And they can choose whether to help us fight. Choose? Taesung asked. He had arrived at the bunker an hour ago, with Yoonji and the other survivors. What if they choose not to help? Daeho smiled sadly. The Velans are not just killing humans. They are destroying forests, polluting oceans, burning everything. The animals know this. They can feel their world dying. They will fight because their survival depends on it too. General Dong-wook stood up and walked to the center of the room. He was a practical man, a soldier for over 40 years. He had never believed in miracles or magic, but he also knew that desperate times required desperate measures. What do you need? He asked. Yuna answered quickly. Teams to deploy neural link devices near animal populations. We need to reach the oceans, the forests, the mountains. We need to make contact with as many species as possible. How long will it take? We have 60 hours until their deadline, Yuna said. We can be ready in 48. The general nodded slowly. Do it. I am authorizing Project Chimera. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Small teams left the bunker under cover of darkness, carrying Daeho's neural link devices. They moved through the ruined country like ghosts, avoiding Velan patrols and destroyed cities. Sergeant Ji-won led a team into the mountains of Jirisan. He was a wildlife specialist, a man who had spent years studying Korea's native animals. He knew these forests like the back of his hand. His team planted devices near the caves where Asiatic black bears hibernated. When the first bear emerged, Ji-won held his breath. The massive creature stood nearly 2 meters tall on its back legs. It sniffed the air, turned its head, and looked directly at Ji-won. Through the neural link, Ji-won felt something strange. Images flashed through his mind, not his memories, but the bears. Hunters with guns. Forests burning. Cubs crying for mothers who never returned. The bears remembered centuries of human cruelty. Ji-won sent his own images back. The alien ships, the burning cities, the dead bodies in the streets. He showed the bear that new hunters had come. Hunters worse than any before. Hunters who would destroy everything. The bear stood still for a long moment. Then, slowly, it nodded its massive head. Other bears emerged from the forest. 10, then 20, then 50. They gathered around Ji-won's team. Not as enemies, but as allies. They understand, Ji-won whispered into his radio. The bears are with us. Similar reports came from across the country. Dr. Yuna waded into the cold waters near Jeju Island, activating the underwater network. Sharks circled her. Great whites, tiger sharks, hammerheads. Through the neural link, she felt their ancient intelligence. These were not mindless killing machines. They were patient hunters who had survived for 400 million years. She showed them the alien submarines patrolling the coast. She showed them the threat to their ocean home. The sharks turned and swam toward the submarines. In the skies above Gyeonggi Province, Lieutenant Subin established contact with the raptors. She had been a falconer before joining the military, training eagles and hawks for hunting. Now she called to them with the neural link, sharing images of alien aircraft and ground patrols. The eagles came first, then the hawks, then the falcons. They circled above her in growing numbers, their sharp eyes watching the enemy below. "The sky belongs to us," Subin said quietly. Back in the bunker, Dr. Hana prepared her secret weapon. She had spent years collecting samples of Asian giant hornets, studying their venom and behavior. Now she released them into the night, guiding them with the neural link toward Velen positions. The hornets flew in perfect silence. Their stingers carried venom that could kill a human with a single dose. The Velens were larger than humans, but they were not immune to poison. General Dongwook watched the reports coming in. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something that might have been hope. "How many animals have joined us?" he asked. Yuna checked her data. Over 50,000 individual creatures so far. Bears, wolves, sharks, eagles, hornets, and dozens of other species, and more, are joining every hour. The general looked at the map showing alien positions across the country. Red dots covered nearly every city and major road. "It's not enough," he said quietly. Yuna nodded. "Then we expand the operation. Every continent, every ocean, every species that will listen." She turned to the communication console and began sending signals across the world. In Australia, kangaroos and crocodiles received the call. In Africa, lions and elephants heard the message. In the Americas, grizzly bears and mountain lions answered. For the first time in Earth's history, the planet's creatures were uniting against a common enemy. The Velens continued their patrols, unaware of what was gathering in the shadows. They scanned for human weapons and human soldiers. They never thought to watch for wolves in the forest, or sharks in the water. They would learn their mistake soon enough. The clock showed 36 hours until the deadline. Project Chimera was ready. The forest of Jirisan was dark and silent. Velen Scout Patrol 7 moved through the trees in perfect formation. 8 soldiers, fully armed, scanning for human survivors. Their commander, a tall creature with scars on his gray face, checked his sensor device. "No human life signs within 3 kilometers, he reported to base. "This sector is clear." He did not know that sensors designed to find humans could not detect wolves. The first wolf struck from the shadows without warning. It was a massive Eurasian wolf. Nearly 50 kilograms of muscle and teeth. It hit the rear soldier before anyone could react, its jaws closing around the gap between helmet and armor. The Velen fell without a sound. The patrol spun around, raising their weapons. But wolves do not attack from one direction. They surround their prey. 20 more wolves emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing in the faint starlight. The Velen commander fired his plasma rifle. The beam cut through the air, bright as lightning. But the wolf he aimed at was already moving, dodging with speed that seemed impossible. These were not ordinary wolves. Through the neural link, they shared the eyes of every member of the pack. They saw every weapon, every movement, every weakness. The battle lasted exactly 47 seconds. When it was over, 8 Velen soldiers lay dead in the fallen leaves. The wolves disappeared back into the forest, leaving no trace except the blood on the ground. 100 kilometers to the south, Dr. Yuna floated in the dark waters of the Korea Strait. She wore a diving suit with special equipment that let her breathe and communicate underwater. Around her swam creatures from nightmare great white sharks, each one over 5 meters long, their mouths full of razor teeth. But Yuna felt no fear. Through the neural link, she understood them. They were not monsters. They were survivors. Ancient hunters who had ruled the oceans for millions of years. And now, they had accepted her as part of their world. Velen's submarine approaching from the east, a voice said in her earpiece. It was Hyun Woo, monitoring from a hidden position on shore. Distance, 4 kilometers, and closing. Yuna closed her eyes and sent the image through the neural link. The sharks received it instantly. Their great bodies turned, moving through the water with terrible grace. The Velen submarine was a small vessel, designed for coastal patrol. It carried a crew of 12 and enough weapons to destroy a human city. But its designers had never imagined an enemy that could not be seen on sensors. An enemy that did not use metal or electricity. The first shark hit the submarine's side at 35 kilometers per hour. The impact shook the vessel. Alarms began to scream. Before the crew could respond, more sharks arrived. They rammed the hull again and again, their ancient instincts guiding them to the weakest points. Water began to pour into the submarine. The Velen crew tried to surface, but the sharks were waiting. When the vessel finally broke apart, the ocean claimed everyone inside. Yuna felt a moment of sadness through the neural link. The sharks did not enjoy killing, but they understood that these invaders threatened everything they loved. The ocean was their home, and they would defend it. Submarine destroyed, Yuna reported. Moving to next target. In the skies above the mountains, Lieutenant Subin led her flock of raptors toward an alien communication tower. The tower stood on a high ridge, guarded by 20 Velen soldiers with anti-aircraft weapons. It would be impossible for human aircraft to approach. But the Velens were not watching for birds. The eagles struck first. They dove from the clouds at speeds over 200 kilometers per hour, their talons extended like knives. They targeted eyes and exposed joints, the weak points in Velen armor. The soldiers screamed and swung their weapons, but the birds were too fast, too many. While the eagles distracted the guards, the falcons went for the tower itself. They carried small, explosive devices, created by the bunker's engineers. The birds dropped them with perfect accuracy, then flew away before the blast. The communication tower exploded in a ball of fire. Velen's signals across the region went dead. Tower destroyed, Subin reported. No casualties on our side. Back at the bunker, General Dong-wook studied the reports with growing amazement. In just 12 hours, animal strikes had destroyed 3 submarines, 17 patrol units, and 4 communication stations. The Velens were losing soldiers and equipment, and they had no idea what was attacking them. Their commanders are confused, said Private Yunji, who was monitoring enemy communications. They think it's human special forces using some kind of new technology. They've increased patrols in all urban areas, but not in the wilderness, Dong-wook observed. They still don't understand. Dr. Hana entered the room, her face tired but excited. The insect network is ready. I've established neural links with hornet colonies across the peninsula. Over 10 million individual insects, all connected. 10 million. Dong-wook repeated. Can you control that many? Not control, guide. Hana sat down at her console. Insects don't think like mammals. They operate on instinct. Chemical signals. Basic programming. But through the neural link, I can give them targets. I can show them threats. And they will respond. With everything they have. She pulled up a map showing Velen positions. Red dots covered the major cities. Seoul, Busan, Incheon. Each dot represented hundreds of enemy soldiers. The hornets are waiting in the forests near every major Velen base, Hana said. On my signal, they will attack. The Velens have shields against bullets and missiles, but they have nothing against insects small enough to enter their ventilation systems. Sergeant G1 arrived with news from the mountains. The bears are ready. They've gathered at 6 locations along the main Velen supply route. When the convoy passes tomorrow, they will strike. What about the wolves? Dong-wook asked, spreading across the country. They move at night, avoiding detection. Each pack has chosen a sector to patrol. Any Velen who enters the wilderness alone will not leave alive. Commander Tae-sung listened to the reports in silence. He had spent his career fighting with technology tanks, missiles, aircraft. The idea of fighting with animals, still seemed strange to him, but he could not argue with results. "The Velans will adapt," he said finally. "When they understand what's happening, they will change their tactics. Then we must hit them before they adapt," Yuna replied. She had returned from the ocean, still wet from her dive. "We have 24 hours until their deadline. By then, they need to be too weak to carry out their threats." Dong-wook stood up and looked at the map. Outside the bunker, in the forests and oceans and skies of Korea, an army was gathering. Not an army of humans, an army of Earth itself. "Begin Phase 2, he ordered. "Attack all targets simultaneously. Let them feel what it means to anger an entire planet." Ender. The signals went out through the neural link network. In the forest, wolves howled. In the mountains, bears roared. In the sky, eagles screamed. The awakening was complete. Now came the fury. The Velan invasion force landed near Incheon at dawn. 3,000 soldiers marched through the empty streets in perfect formation. Their boots crushed the broken glass and fallen debris. Their weapons gleamed in the morning light. Behind them came supply vehicles carrying food, ammunition, and equipment for the occupation. Colonel Jirnash commanded the force. He was a veteran of 17 planetary conquests, a soldier who had never known defeat. He looked at the ruined human city with contempt. These creatures had fought bravely, but they were weak. Their weapons could not pierce Velan armor. Their soldiers died by the thousands, while his troops suffered only minor losses. "Secure the harbor," he ordered. "We will use this location as our primary supply base." His officers moved to obey. Everything was going according to plan. Then the wolves came. They appeared from everywhere at once, from ruined buildings, from underground tunnels, from shadows that should have been empty. Not just Korean wolves, but wolves from every continent. Gray wolves from America, Arctic wolves from Canada, timber wolves from Russia. In the chaos of the invasion, humans had worked together to transport predators around the world, building an army that no one expected. Captain Min-ki led a small guerrilla unit that worked alongside the wolves. He watched from a collapsed building as the pack surrounded a Velan patrol. The aliens raised their weapons, but the wolves were already moving. They did not attack like wild animals. They attacked like soldiers. The first wave hit from the left, drawing fire. While the Velans turned to shoot, the second wave struck from the right. A third wave circled behind, cutting off retreat. The wolves moved in perfect coordination, guided by the neural link that connected them all. Min-ki raised his old rifle and fired at a Velan officer. The bullet bounced off the armor, but it distracted the alien for one crucial second. A massive gray wolf leaped onto his back, its teeth finding the gap between helmet and shoulder plate. "They're inside the perimeter," a Velan soldier screamed into his radio. "We need reinforcements. We need—" His voice cut off as 3 wolves pulled him down. Colonel Jirnash received the reports with disbelief. His units were under attack across the city. Not by human soldiers, by animals. Wild creatures that should have fled at the sight of his army were instead fighting with discipline and coordination that seemed impossible. "Use heavy weapons," he ordered. "Burn the entire district if necessary. But fire takes time to spread. Wolves do not." By the time reinforcements arrived, 17 Velan soldiers were dead. The wolves had vanished into the ruins, leaving only blood and confusion behind. In the Yellow Sea, Dr. Yuna guided her fleet toward the Velan naval forces. The aliens had 20 ships patrolling the coast, protecting supply lines from human submarines. Their shields could stop any missile. Their sensors could detect any vessel. They could not detect orcas. The killer whales moved through the dark water like black and white ghosts. Each one weighed over 5 tons. Each one could swim at 50 kilometers per hour. And each one understood, through the neural link, exactly what Yuna needed them to do. The first target was a transport ship carrying supplies for the ground forces. It was not a warship. Its shields were designed for space debris, not physical attack. The orcas hit it from below, ramming the hull with their massive heads. The impact shook the entire vessel. Alarms screamed. Crew members ran to their stations, trying to understand what was happening. There were no enemy ships on sensors, no missiles incoming, nothing that their technology could explain. A second impact. Then, a third. The hull began to crack. "Seal the lower decks," the captain ordered. "All crew to..." The fourth impact broke through. Water poured into the ship. The orcas followed, their intelligent eyes watching as the vessel sank. In the command bunker, General Dongwook watched the attack through satellite feeds captured by hidden human stations. His old soldier's heart swelled with something he had not felt in days. Pride. 3 transport ships destroyed, Yoonji reported. Enemy supply lines are disrupted. They're pulling warships from patrol duty to protect the remaining vessels, which means fewer ships watching the coast, Commander Taesung observed. We can move more freely. More importantly, they're scared. Yuna's voice came over the radio from her position at sea. I can feel it through the neural link. The orcas sense their fear. These Velans have never faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't stop with technology. Dongwook nodded slowly. Continue the attacks. Don't give them time to recover. The assault continued throughout the day. In the mountains, bears ambushed a supply convoy, tearing apart vehicles with their massive claws. The Velans inside escaped, only to be hunted down by wolf packs waiting in the forest. Not one soldier from that convoy survived. In the skies, eagles and hawks struck communication dishes and sensor arrays. They were too small and fast for anti-aircraft weapons to track. By evening, Velan commanders had lost contact with nearly half their units. And as the sun set, Dr. Hana released her hornets. The insects rose from the forests in clouds that turned the sky dark. They moved toward Velan positions with purpose that seemed almost intelligent, because, through the neural link, they were guided by a human mind that understood exactly where to strike. Private Yoonji walked through an abandoned Velan camp the next morning. She had been sent to assess the damage, but nothing had prepared her for what she found. The Velan soldiers lay everywhere. Hundreds of them. Their armor was intact. Their weapons sat beside them, unfired, but their bodies were covered in tiny wounds, thousands of hornet stings that had pumped venom into their bloodstream. They didn't even have time to fight back, she whispered. Her radio crackled. Eunji, report. The camp is. They're all dead, sir. Every single one. She swallowed hard. The hornets did this in less than an hour. Back at the Velan command ship, Colonel Jir Nash received the casualty reports. In one day, he had lost over 500 soldiers. His supply lines were broken. His communications were disrupted, and he still did not fully understand what was killing his troops. Wild animals, his science officer said, somehow coordinated. Perhaps a human experiment gone wrong. Or perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps this planet is more dangerous than our intelligence suggested. Jirnash slammed his fist on the console. I will not be defeated by beasts. Order all units to withdraw to fortified positions. We will hold the cities and rain fire on the wilderness until nothing living remains. He sent a message to the orbiting fleet. Prepare planetary bombardment. If we cannot hold this world, we will burn it. The message was intercepted by human monitoring stations. When General Dongwook read it, his face went pale. They're going to destroy everything, he said quietly. From orbit, every forest, every ocean, every living thing. Commander Taesung looked at the map. Can we stop them? Yuna entered the room, still wet from the ocean. Not from the ground, but we have a plan. She paused. It's dangerous. It might not work, but it's the only chance we have. Tell me. Dongwook said. Yuna took a deep breath. The whales, She explained her idea. When she finished, the room was silent for a long time. Finally, Dong-wook spoke. "Do it. May whatever gods exist have mercy on us all." The clock showed 12 hours, until bombardment began. Earth's final battle was about to start. Dr. Hana stood on a hill overlooking the largest Velen base in Korea. The enemy had gathered their remaining ground forces here, over 2,000 soldiers protected by energy shields and heavy weapons. They had learned from the wolf attacks and the orca assaults. Now they stayed together, watching every approach with sensors and guards, but they still did not watch the sky for insects. "All hornet colonies are in position," Hana said into her radio. 37 million individuals, ready to attack." General Dong-wook's voice came back tense. "You understand what this will do? There will be no survivors." "I understand." Hana's voice was calm, but her hands trembled. She had spent her life studying insects with wonder and respect. Now she was about to use them as weapons of war. "The Velens gave us no choice. They threatened to burn our world. We must stop them before they can carry out that threat." "Do it." Hana closed her eyes and reached through the neural link. She felt millions of tiny minds. Simple, but focused. She showed them the Velen base. She showed them the threat to their hives, their forests, their world. And she gave them a single command. Attack. The swarm rose from the forests like a living storm. The noise was terrifying, a deep humming sound that grew louder every second. The sky turned black with insects. Hornets, wasps, and bees flew together in numbers never before seen in human history. The Velen guards saw them coming. They raised their weapons and fired. Plasma beams cut through the swarm, killing thousands of insects with each shot. But for every 1,000 that fell, 10,000 more took their place. The swarm reached the base and poured over the walls like water breaking through a dam. Inside the base, chaos erupted. Soldiers ran for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The insects found every gap in armor, every crack in shields. They crawled into breathing masks and communication devices. Their stingers struck again and again, pumping venom into alien flesh. A young Velen private tried to seal himself inside a vehicle. He watched through the window as his squadmates fell, their screams muffled by the buzzing sound that filled the air. Hornets found the vehicle's air intake and poured inside. He had time to scream once before the venom stopped his heart. Dr. Hana felt everything through the neural link. She felt the insects dying by the millions, burned by plasma fire, crushed under armored boots, sacrificing themselves to take down their enemies. She felt their simple determination, their willingness to die for the hive, and she felt the Velen fear. Through the insect's senses, she detected the chemical changes in alien bodies, stress hormones flooding their systems, hearts racing, minds breaking under the terror of an enemy they could not fight. "It's working," she reported. "The base is falling." The attack lasted 97 minutes. When the last hornet finally stopped flying, over 1,500 Velen soldiers lay dead. The survivors, fewer than 500, had sealed themselves inside the most protected buildings, too afraid to come out. General Dong-wook received the report with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. Now we must stop the orbital bombardment. Commander Tae-sung shook his head. Our anti-orbital weapons were destroyed in the first attack. We have nothing that can reach their ships in space. We have one thing, Yuna said. She had been quiet throughout the insect attack, preparing for her own mission. We have the whales. She explained the plan again, even though everyone already knew it. Blue whales and sperm whales would carry nuclear devices strapped to their bodies. They would dive deep, beyond the range of Velen sensors. Then, at the right moment, they would surface and launch. The Velens will detect the missiles, Tae-sung pointed out. They'll shoot them down. They'll detect the missiles launched from whales, Yuna agreed. But will they shoot at what looks like simple marine animals breaching for air? Their targeting systems are designed to track metal, technology, weapons. A whale is just meat and bone. invisible. Dae-ho, the neural link engineer, stepped forward. The whales will bring the weapons close enough that the Velans won't have time to react. And the whales? Yoonji asked quietly. What happens to them? The room went silent. Yuna answered slowly. They understand the risk. I shared everything with them, through the neural link. What we're asking, what might happen, what it means for their families. They chose to fight anyway. Sergeant G1 spoke up. How can they choose? They're animals. They don't understand concepts like sacrifice or war. You're wrong. Yuna's voice was firm. Whales have lived in these oceans for 50 million years. They have languages, families, cultures. They remember everything, every ship that hunted them, every ocean that grew poisoned, every calf lost to human cruelty. And yet they chose to help us. She paused. They didn't help us because we asked. They helped because they understand that if the Velans win, everything dies. Not just humans. Everything. The sun began to set. In the ocean, the whales gathered at 6 launch points along the Korean coast. Each one carried a modified nuclear device, sealed against the water, and connected to a simple rocket system. Pilot Jae-hyuk prepared his experimental aircraft. He would fly, escort for the mission, drawing enemy fire away from the whales, if necessary. His was the most advanced plane left in Korean military possession, a stealth fighter that had survived by being hidden underground during the first attack. Ready for launch, he reported. Velans are powering up their orbital weapons, Yoonji warned. Bombardment begins in 2 hours. Dr. Yuna waded into the ocean one final time. The water was cold, but she barely felt it. Through the neural link, she connected with the whales waiting in the deep. They were magnificent. Blue whales longer than any building, their hearts the size of cars, sperm whales with brains 6 times larger than human brains, carrying intelligence that humans had only begun to understand. And they were all looking at her, waiting for the signal. I'm sorry, she told them through the link. I'm sorry we have to ask this of you. The response came back not in words, but in feelings. Images of calves playing in warm waters. Memories of songs passed down through generations. And underneath it all, a fierce determination that surprised her with its strength. This is our world too, the whales seemed to say. We will protect it. Yuna wiped tears from her eyes. Launch, when ready, she said. The whales dove deep, carrying their deadly cargo into the darkness. Above them, the Velan ships orbited peacefully, unaware that death was rising from below. The mission had begun. In the command bunker, everyone watched and waited. The screens showed the whales' positions, tracked by underwater sensors. They were approaching the surface, timing their breach for maximum impact. Velan ships are charging bombardment weapons, Taesung reported. 15 minutes until they fire. The whales are almost in position. Yuna's voice came over the radio. 3 minutes to launch. General Dong-wook gripped the edge of the console. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If the plan worked, they might have a chance. If it failed, Earth would burn. Come on, he whispered. Come on. The first whale breached. It was a blue whale, named by researchers as Ocean Thunder, the largest animal ever known to exist on Earth. It rose from the water like a living mountain, sunlight gleaming off its gray skin. The rocket on its back ignited and shot upward toward the stars. Then another whale breached. And another. 6 launches, in perfect succession. Each one aiming at a different Velan ship. Alarms screamed in the Velan command vessel. Unknown projectiles incoming. Source appears to be marine life forms? The Velan captain stared at his screen in disbelief. That's impossible. Animals cannot. The first nuclear device detonated against the shield of a Velan warship. The shield held but barely. Warning lights flashed across every console. Then the second device hit. And the third. 3 Velan capital ships died in the first minute, their shields overwhelmed by weapons they never expected. 2 more were badly damaged, limping away from Earth orbit. The remaining ships tried to flee, but they had underestimated the greatest hunters on Earth. The mission was succeeding, but the cost was just beginning. The Velen fleet was breaking apart. 3 capital ships had been destroyed in the first attack. 2 more were damaged and retreating. The remaining vessels scattered across orbit, their commanders desperate to escape the impossible weapons rising from Earth's oceans. Admiral Zenkroth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his empire's greatest invasion force crumble before his eyes. He had conquered 12 worlds. He had destroyed civilizations that spanned star systems. And now he was losing to a primitive planet that should have fallen in hours. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said nothing about this capability." His science officer shook his head. "The weapons were carried by living creatures, Admiral. Marine animals. Our sensors are not designed to track biological threats at this range. We never imagined." "You never imagined that animals could fight back," a new voice interrupted. The communication screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was General Dong-wook, broadcasting from the underground bunker. "You studied our armies. You studied our technology. But you forgot that humans are not alone on this planet." Admiral Zenkroth stared at the old human soldier with hatred. "You think you have won? We still have enough firepower to destroy your entire continent. Try it," Dong-wook replied calmly. "And see what else comes from the ocean." The Admiral's tactical officer spoke urgently. "Sir, sensors are detecting more contacts rising from the water. Hundreds of them. No, thousands." The screen showed the Pacific Ocean from orbit. Dark shapes were surfacing everywhere, whales of every species, rising together in a display of coordination that seemed impossible. Each one carried something on its back. Not all were weapons. Some were simply swimming upward, breaking the surface, showing the Velens that the ocean itself had turned against them. "They're sending a message," the science officer said quietly. "They want us to know how many there are. How many remain ready to fight." Deep beneath the waves, Dr. Yuna swam with her pod. Through the neural link, she felt connected to every whale in the ocean, not just around Korea, but across the entire planet. Blue whales in the Atlantic, humpbacks in the Pacific, sperm whales in the Indian Ocean. For the first time in history, they were all working together. She also felt their losses. Ocean Thunder, the great blue whale who had carried the first weapon, had died in the launch. The rocket's heat had been too much for his massive body. He had known it would kill him. He had volunteered anyway. 3 other whales had died as well. Their names echoed through the neural link. Storm Singer, Deep Walker, Ancient Voice. The ocean mourned them, even as it prepared for the next battle. But their sacrifice had not been in vain. The Velen bombardment fleet was crippled. Earth had time. Pilot Jae-hyuk flew his fighter through the debris field in low orbit. Pieces of Velen warships floated everywhere, some still glowing with heat. He had never expected to see this. Days ago, these ships had seemed invincible. Now they were junk. "Admiral's flagship is pulling back," he reported. "They're retreating to high orbit. Don't let them escape," Commander Taesung ordered. "If they regroup, they'll call for reinforcements from the Empire. I'm 1 pilot in 1 fighter. I can't stop a capital ship. You don't have to stop it. Just slow it down." Taesung paused. "The Eagles are coming." 1. Jae-hyuk almost laughed. "Eagles? In space?" "Special transport. Dr. Daeho modified some of our surviving spacecraft to carry passengers." The Eagles volunteered. Jae-hyuk looked at his sensors. 3 small craft were rising from Earth's atmosphere, each one carrying a dozen large birds equipped with special suits that would protect them from the vacuum of space. It was insane. It was brilliant. The Eagles reached orbit and launched toward the Velen flagship. They were small enough to avoid point defense weapons, fast enough to outmaneuver targeting systems. And they were angry. Through the neural link, Lieutenant Subin guided them from the bunker far below. She felt their fierce determination, their eagle pride that refused to flee from any enemy. They found the flagship's sensor arrays and communication dishes and tore them apart with talons that had evolved to kill. Blind and deaf, the Velen flagship drifted helplessly. Jae-hyuk moved in and disabled its engines with precise missile strikes. "Flagship captured," he reported. "Admiral is requesting terms for negotiation." General Dong-wook smiled grimly. "Tell him he may speak with our representatives. Give him coordinates for the meeting point." The coordinates led to a small island off the Korean coast. The Velen shuttle landed on the beach, and Admiral Zenkrath stepped out with his honor guard. He expected to find human diplomats in formal clothing, ready to discuss surrender terms. Instead, he found himself surrounded by predators. Wolves sat in a circle around the landing zone. Bears stood at the edge of the forest, their massive bodies half hidden in shadows. Eagles perched in the trees above, their sharp eyes watching every movement. And in the water behind him, dorsal fins circled sharks, waiting patiently. The Admiral's guards raised their weapons. A low growl rippled through the assembled animals. The guards slowly lowered their weapons again. A small group of humans walked through the wall of creatures. Dr. Yuna, still wearing her diving suit. Sergeant G1, with a gray wolf walking beside him. Dr. Hannah, a single hornet sitting calmly on her shoulder. And General Dong-wook, his old uniform torn and dirty but his spine straight. "You asked to negotiate," Dong-wook said. "Speak." Admiral Zenkrath looked around at the army of creatures. "What is this?" Yuna stepped forward. "They understand more than you imagine. The neural link works both ways, Admiral. They feel what we feel. They know what we know." She gestured to the wolves. "They know that you destroyed 17 cities in your first attack. 40 million humans died in the first hour." A wolf growled, deep and threatening. "They know you threatened to burn this planet," she continued. "To destroy every forest, every ocean, every living thing." A bear rose on its hind legs, towering nearly 3 meters tall. "And they know," Yuna said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "that, unlike humans, they have no concepts like prisoner of war or rules of engagement. To them, you are simply prey." The Admiral's face had gone pale gray. His guard commander leaned close. "Sir, our weapons would kill perhaps a dozen of them before they reached us. There are hundreds here. We cannot win this fight." Admiral Zenkrath closed his eyes. He had imagined many ways his life might end. Being eaten by alien wildlife on a primitive world had never been among them. "What do you want?" he asked. General Dong-wook handed him a data device. "You will broadcast this message to every species your empire has conquered. You will tell them what happened here. You will tell them that Earth is not one species, it is millions, working together. And you will tell them that if the Velen Empire ever returns, we will be ready." The Admiral looked at the document. "This will mean the end of the Empire. The conquered worlds will rise up." "They will." "Yes," Dong-wook interrupted. "They will." He smiled coldly. "That is the price of threatening Earth. You wanted to destroy one world. Instead, you will free dozens." The animals moved closer, tightening the circle. The Admiral felt their eyes on him, hundreds of predators, waiting for a signal. "I accept your terms," he said quickly. The broadcast went out that night. Across the galaxy, conquered species saw their oppressors humbled by a tiny planet they had never heard of. They saw images of wolves tearing through Velen armor, of whales destroying warships, of eagles attacking in the void of space. The message was simple. Even the smallest world can fight back. Even the conquered can rise. On Earth, the celebrations began. But for those who had fought, there was still work to do. The war was over. The healing was just beginning. 1 year had passed since the Velen invasion. The world was still healing. Cities lay in ruins. Millions had died, but humanity had survived. And more importantly, humanity had learned something precious. They were not alone on their planet, and they never had been. Dr. Yuna stood before the United Earth Council in the newly built Assembly Hall in Seoul. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed Earth from space. But this was not the old view of a planet owned by humans. This was a new vision, a world of 8 million species, each one connected, each one valued. We made a pact during the war, Yuna said to the assembled leaders. Humans and the creatures who share our world. Not a pact of masters and servants, a pact of equals. The display changed, showing the neural link network that now covered the planet. Nodes in every ocean, every forest, every mountain range. Communication systems that allowed humans and animals to work together, to understand each other, to protect their shared home. Some said it was impossible, Yuna continued. They said animals could not be partners, only resources. They said the neural link was a temporary measure for war, not a foundation for peace. The hall doors opened, and a delegation unlike any in human history entered. Sergeant G1 walked beside a massive gray wolf, the same one who had fought with him during the invasion. Dr. Hana followed with a glass case containing a hornet queen and her attendants. And at the back, escorted by marine biologists in pressure suits, came a holographic projection of a blue whale, the daughter of ocean thunder, speaking for the creatures of the deep. Representatives from every major animal group had chosen to attend. They could not speak human words, but through the neural link, their thoughts and feelings flowed freely to every person in the room. The pact is simple, G1 said. We protect each other. We heal the damage that has been done, not just from the invasion, but from centuries of human expansion. We share this world truly, for the first time. A diplomat from the European Union raised his hand. This is remarkable. But is it practical? Our economies depend on... The wolf beside G1 growled softly. G1 held up a hand. He says, economies can change. Dead planets cannot. He looked at the diplomat calmly. The animals are not asking for permission. They are telling us what will happen. The question is whether humans will participate willingly. The room went silent. Through the neural link, every person present felt the determination of the creatures around them. These were not pets asking for treats. These were partners demanding respect. General Dong-wook, now chairman of the Earth Defense Council, stepped forward. In the past year, animal-human cooperation has transformed our society. Dolphins patrol our shipping lanes, detecting threats we could never see. Eagles monitor our forests, alerting us to fires before they spread. Wolves have returned to ecosystems that needed them, restoring balance that took centuries to lose. He pulled up statistics on the display. Crime has dropped 40% in areas where wolf packs patrol, with human police. Ocean pollution has decreased by 60% since the whales began guiding our cleanup efforts. And food production has actually increased, because we finally learned to work with nature instead of against it. The holographic whale made a deep, resonant sound. Dr. Yuna translated. She says her people remember a time before humans, when the oceans were clean and full of life. She says they do not want to return to that time. They want to move forward, together, to something better. Commander Tae-sung, now retired from military service, watched from the gallery. Beside him sat Private Yoon-ji, who had become one of the first official human-animal ambassadors. She worked with a pack of wolves in the DMZ, the former border zone that had become a wildlife sanctuary. Do you think it will last? He asked her quietly. Yoon-ji smiled. The pact is not just words, sir. It's a feeling. When you're connected to them through the neural link, you understand. They're not tools or weapons. They're family. Different, strange, sometimes terrifying, but family. Below, the council began voting on the formal pact of species. One by one, nations agreed. There would be new laws protecting animal habitats, new courts where animal interests were represented, new technology designed not to conquer nature, but to communicate with it. Outside the assembly hall, crowds gathered to celebrate. Humans and animals stood together, children riding on the backs of gentle bears, dolphins leaping in the harbor as sailors cheered, eagles soaring overhead with streamers of color tied to their legs. But not everyone celebrated with pure joy. In a quiet corner of the hall, Dr. Hana sat alone, looking at the list of species that had been lost forever during the invasion. Whole populations wiped out by Velen attacks or by the chaos of war. Species that would never be saved, never be connected, never be known. Yuna found her there. Hana, the ceremony is almost over. I know. Hana wiped her eyes. I was thinking about what we lost. Not just human lives, animal lives. Species that survived millions of years, ended in a few terrible days. Yuna sat beside her. I think about it too. Ocean thunder. The wolves who died defending Seoul. The hornets who gave their lives by the millions. She paused. But I also think about what we gained. Not just victory, understanding. For the first time in human history, we truly know we're not alone. The ceremony concluded with a final proclamation, read by General Dong-wook in a voice that echoed through speakers across the world. On this day, humanity acknowledges what should have been obvious from the beginning. Earth is not our planet. It is our home, one we share with millions of other species, each with their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own right to exist. The Velen Empire tried to conquer this world, believing they faced a single, weak species. They learned the truth too late. He looked out at the gathering of humans and animals. We are not weak. We are not alone. And we are not afraid. Any species that threatens Earth threatens all of us. We will respond together. We will fight together. And we will win together. We will win together. The crowd erupted in cheers. Wolves howled. Eagles screamed. Somewhere in the ocean, whales sang songs that carried for hundreds of kilometers. Late that night, Yuna walked along the beach near her old research facility. The building had been destroyed in the invasion, but was now being rebuilt as the first human-animal communication center. Soon, scientists from around the world would come here to study the neural link and develop new ways for species to understand each other. A dorsal fin broke the surface nearby. Through the neural link, Yuna felt a familiar presence. One of the dolphins she had worked with during the war, now leading his own pod. Glad you survived, she sent him. Glad you came back, he replied. Will you swim with us tomorrow? Yuna smiled. Every day, if you'll have me. The dolphin made a sound that the neural link translated as laughter. Then he dove, rejoining his family in the dark water. Above, the stars shone clear and bright. Somewhere out there, the Velen Empire was crumbling as conquered worlds rose up in rebellion. Ships carried the story of Earth to every corner of the galaxy. The story of a planet that fought back. A planet where every creature had chosen to stand together. And on that small blue world, in forests and oceans and mountains and skies, Earth's creatures returned to their lives, hunting, swimming, flying, living, watching, waiting. The pact was forever, because Earth remembers, and Earth protects its own.